Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching the Wire Wrap. I'm Sravasti Dasgupta, and joining me today is Siddharth Varadarajan. He's founding editor at the Wire and Sushant Singh. He's from the Caravan. And before we get into what are the major news developments that's taken place today, let's just tell our viewers about Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral visit after the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, which has brought him some criticism from friends and foes alike. So Modi visited Russia in his first trip after the 2024 elections, and images of Modi hugging Russian President Vladimir Putin has not been taken well by Ukraine as well as the US. So the Ukrainian president has expressed outrage at Modi hugging Putin on the very same day that a children's hospital in Ukraine was attacked, and India has of course sought to placate both sides. So Siddharth, how do you see this really transpiring? His first visit after the election, when he lost a majority in a sense, short of an absolute majority, and his first big visit is being criticized by friends and allies alike.
You know, diplomats have historically told their principals, told their leaders that, try not to hug the devil. But if you're going to hug the devil, then at least make sure you get something in return. Modi's visit to Russia and his summit with Putin has to be judged. The outrage that it has generated and the anger has to be judged against that metric, right? Obviously, the West isn't thrilled that India has good ties with Russia. The West and America aren't thrilled that Modi was making a visit there in the first place. They're not happy that India has refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that we buy oil, that we buy weapons, etc., etc. And India has got away with that position largely by arguing that, look, India acts in its national interest and will not be dictated by the West's approach to the Russia-Ukraine war, but will try to strike out its own independent position. And, as far as diplomacy and international policy goes, that's a valid approach for any country to want to take, right, to have an independent view. The problem is that what is India getting in return for the close ties that it has developed and is developing with Russia after the invasion, and particularly in this visit, right, which is the first visit that Modi has made to Moscow since the invasion. This isn't their first meeting. I think he met with Putin in Samarkand at the SCO summit a couple of years ago. But this is the first sort of proper bilateral summit in person that's been held, and you should have a pretty good reason for wanting to do it, right, and a pretty solid agenda of achievables that you take with you in order to justify the obvious cost that you're going to pay, right? So I think the Indian side knew there was a cost. I'm sure Modi's advisors knew that going to Moscow at this time, when the war is going on, when the NATO summit is imminent, is going to attract a lot of criticism. And they must have said, well, we should do this because it's worth it, because we're going to get something in return, right? And we know from the kind of briefing that they held with the reporters that they wanted assurances from Russia on the key question of the speedy return of Indian workers duped into serving on the Ukrainian battlefront. They wanted assurances from Russia on the resumption and timely delivery of arms spares. The S-400 anti-missile system has been held up. And they wanted other kind of sort of assurances on the economic front, because India's bought a hell of a lot of stuff from Russia. And Russia has accumulated all these rupee assets in India, and it's not buying enough from India, right? So there were all these issues to be solved. There is no indication whatsoever that this hug that Modi gave Putin got India any closer to these deliverables. I think this is the problem.
Yeah. So a big outcome of this visit that is being portrayed by the Indian side is what you mentioned earlier about getting these Indian soldiers who were duped into serving for the Russian army. And Russia has said that a compensation of 1.3 crores, a monthly stipend of 18,000 for minor children till they turn 18, and Russian citizenship to the kin of Indians killed in the Ukraine war. So a lot of this is being portrayed as a diplomatic victory on the Indian side. But interestingly, this is what you've also written about, Sushant, is that this is actually much less than what Agniveers in India get. How do you see this promise that is being portrayed as a victory by the Indian side, and is it really a victory?
No, honestly, I think the idea is to somehow project to a domestic political audience that something great has been achieved. And as Siddharth said, there is not one reason which we can give why Mr. Modi visited Moscow. As far as these young men who are serving on the Ukrainian battlefront are concerned, Mr. Modi did not need to go to Moscow to negotiate with Putin to get this done. This could have easily been done at a much lower level, whether at the level of the foreign minister or at the level of foreign secretary or even at diplomatic level. What, around 45, 50 young men are serving there? To bring them back, Mr. Modi does not need to go there. In fact, even with Mr. Modi being there, there is no concrete promise that has been made. We don't know. We even don't know how many people exactly are there. Indians are there. We don't know how many Indians are dead. We don't know any date of when these Indians who are still serving on those front lines, when are they going to come back? Nothing concrete has been told. It is a victory which is being depicted only in terms of vibes, only in terms of saying something has been done, or he has promised that he will do it. But why where are the concrete details? Why don't we have those concrete details so far? And I think the Russian diplomat who spoke in Delhi yesterday made it amply clear that nobody has been duped. People have gone there for commercial reasons, which is exactly what it is. People have gone there for commercial reasons. They may not have fully realized what kind of contracts they were signing, and they may be thinking that they're going as helpers and they're being pushed on to front lines. But people have got money in their bank accounts. So people have sent a couple of lakhs of rupees. Somebody in Kerala, I was reading in another news report, got a couple of lakhs rupees sent to his family in Gujarat as well. The fact that family members of some of these dead men want to go and take Russian citizenship. I believe in Gujarat, a family says that their two children of the man who died, they would want to go and take the Russian citizenship or work there. Clearly shows that there are massive problems within India, both economic and social, where these young men cannot find opportunities, and they consider even these risky opportunities in Russia better than what they can find here. The same is true in Sri Lanka. The same is true of young men in Nepal. But the fundamental question remains beyond this is that why did Mr. Modi go to Moscow? We still do not know the reason. The diplomatic reason that is being told, that this is going to create a wedge between China and Russia. I think China has too much leverage over Russia at this point in time in terms of kind of support that it gives, whether it is in terms of goods, in terms of dual use equipment, and so on and so forth, that there is no way India can drive a wedge or push Russia away from China. Other than that, whether getting these young men back or in terms of crude oil or in terms of anything else, I don't think there are any tangibles, and we still don't know the reason. And in fact, you ended up angering the United States and other Western countries. Earlier today, the US ambassador to India has issued a very, very strong statement. Has gone on record and said that the ties between India and US may be strong, but they're not strong enough to be able to take these kind of setbacks in this thing.
So this is what I want to, before we move on from this, Siddharth, I want to ask you, where does this leave India and US? Because this kind of criticism that's been coming from the US with this visit, with Modi's visit to Moscow, is kind of unprecedented in the last few years, when India has tried to portray itself as a very close ally of the US. Modi was invited last year as well to a very grand welcome by the US, and now we are seeing this kind of criticism. What does this mean for India-US ties?
I think the challenge for India when Russia invaded the Ukraine 2-3 years ago was, how do you take a stand on a key issue of principle, which is central to India's national interest, which is importance of defending national sovereignty, importance of defending the UN Charter, importance of defending the principle that countries cannot go to war in order to grab someone else's territory, right? These are principles that are in India's national interest to defend. India should have found a way to defend those core principles by criticizing and, I would say condemning the Russian invasion, even as it put forth its point of view that the US and Western approach, which was one of sanctions, which was one of, in a way, fueling the war or turning a war of Ukrainian national liberation against Russia into a geopolitical war between two blocs. So India should have been in a position to, it should have had that agility, and we know that it does have that agility to take a stand of principle, tell its Russian friends that this is not acceptable, even as you tell your American friends that, look, we don't agree with your approach. We've done nothing of the kind, right? So today India is not a player, actually. what India says on Ukraine, whether we support Russia or we don't support Russia, whether we support Kiev or we don't support Kiev, makes no difference on the battlefield. It makes no difference on the diplomatic table. So we have dealt ourselves out of the equation, which is a bit astonishing and shocking for a country that says it should be a permanent member of the Security Council, right? So what do you bring to the table? Nothing. Mr. Modi, the Vishwaguru, brings nothing, right? And so this visit has underlined that. Now, is there a cost? Yes, the language that the US has used is unprecedented. The Ukrainian president himself has used sharp language. I think the cost is likely to be mitigated somewhat by the fact that US policy towards Ukraine is itself under a cloud, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the election. Donald Trump is on record, and he's the front runner clearly. He's on record as saying that if he were to win, he would reach an agreement with Putin. He has questioned America's willingness to even support NATO, right? So there's so much of flux and uncertainty in America's own position towards Europe that what Modi says or doesn't say, who he hugs or doesn't hug, doesn't really matter in the larger picture, right? And that also is a bit of a sad comment on India's status in the world, right? So I think the optics are terrible. I think India has suffered a setback in terms of its moral standing, and also as a country that clearly has, a leadership that does not have a clear sense of how to defend its national interest in the face of a complex situation. But I don't think it's going to. I think there are going to be bigger problems that the world is going to have to deal with. So 6 months from now, this is probably likely to be, forgotten in a larger set of problems for the world. But for India, this vacuum in our thinking remains something that we need to address.
Sravasti, just one point on this. So there are very clearly in Washington DC, on the Hill and in the whole ecosystem, there are very clearly two schools of thought about India. One is the Kurt Campbell, Jack Sullivan school of thought, which wants to engage very strongly with India, which wants to support Mr. Modi irrespective of what's going on. But there's an equally strong idea there that Mr. Modi or the kind of government that is in India today is not the right kind of government to engage with and would not be really provide the counterweight to China. I think the group that was supporting the idea that they should engage more deeply with India, that group has suffered a setback. And if you see somebody like Kurt Campbell calling up India's foreign secretary and speaking in harsh tone and saying, this has been a huge disappointment, or why are you doing this? Why didn't you inform us earlier? Clearly points to the other side gaining ground in DC, and those things, as we know, have longer term consequences because you lose the battle of the narrative and the support where you had, before Mr. Modi, India had massive support cutting across all sections. That is getting divided, and the side which was bargaining or arguing for Mr. Modi being supported strongly, that is becoming weaker in DC.
All right, so let's shift focus back home to India a little bit, where national security is once again under question because 5 soldiers have lost their lives just 2 days ago in Jammu and Kashmir's Kathua. Now, this attack took place after heavily armed militants first stopped the movement of troops by hurling a grenade at a military truck, and several dozens were injured, I beg your pardon, and 5 have lost their lives. Siddharth, how do you see these rising attacks in the Jammu division of Jammu and Kashmir? Previously, this was not an area which was under attack as much as it has been in recent times, and especially after the reading down of Article 370, when the BJP has in a sense sought to portray that terrorism attacks have gone down. We are seeing the spate of attacks in Jammu division.
I think it's very alarming, both for the security dimension, the loss of life, the fact that the security situation in the Jammu region and J&K as a whole going ahead is going to be more and more unsettled. I think that's a very, very negative sort of outlook that we are forced to have, right? But on the other, it is something which serves as a reminder to the fact that there is, this idea that you can wave an ideological wand or take some kind of a political posture and India's problems will magically disappear, right? So in the case of diplomacy, Mr. Modi's personal diplomacy is supposed to be, the solution to all of India's problems. And in the sort of domestic sphere in J&K, the RSS position that get rid of Article 370, and the problems will go away. This is yet another reminder of how wrong-footed the Union government's approach, the Modi government's approach to J&K has been. The political dimension to the problem remains, not only does it remain unaddressed, I would say the political dimension is getting exacerbated, and it's happening in a latent fashion. It's happening, there's a lot of subterranean resentment, there's a lot of subterranean churn. It wouldn't surprise me when the numbers come out, and there are agencies that collect this data, that the number of locals involved in militancy has gone up. We know that this is the case in the valley, and I suspect even in the Jammu region. New cohorts are being alienated. New recruits are emerging for these groups, and this is a challenge that the Indian state is simply not even willing to face. So, politically you are caught wrong-footed. On the security front, you are dealing with problems that you never anticipated. And I think that the sooner the Modi government recognizes that it has blundered badly in trying to fix a problem that didn't exist, right? But I mean, 370 was not, Indian state was pursuing a certain strategy. I would say prior to 2019, if you look at the data on attacks, data on casualties, there is a sense in which the graph was coming down, and you have now created a situation where things are getting worse again. So I think that the government needs to go back to the drawing board, and I think people who have worked in the security field, many of whom have retired and have, some of them are openly criticizing the government, Dulat Saab and others, they need to be more vocal, and I think the government needs to pay some heed to their wisdom rather than pursuing this very ideologically driven approach to J&K, which is not paying any dividends.
So this problem, the fact is that the BJP has left this unaddressed, as Siddharth was just mentioning, that of course during elections you make a meal out of it, that terror incidents have gone down, that we have brought normalcy to Jammu and Kashmir, but when such incidents do take place, there's no comment from the BJP. The central government is not addressing it in any manner. Yet there is there's a long promise of elections in J&K going to be held at some point. We don't know when. So how does this really play out for the BJP, really, where they have kind of made their strategy and their main ideological point national security, and J&K has been a big part of that?
So I think there are two kinds of audiences here. One is the audience in rest of India, and one is the audience in Jammu and Kashmir. BJP performed very poorly in the Lok Sabha polls in J&K, including in the two constituency which it won eventually, Jammu and the Udhampur constituency. Even there did not do well. It is nowhere close to getting a majority on its own, or even with its proxies in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. My fear is that these attacks, when they've happened in, and I desist from calling them terror attacks, because terror is something which would be inflicted on innocent civilians. This is actually targeting armed men, armed soldiers of the Union. So these attacks by armed militants, by gunmen who have a different point of view, is actually could actually be used as an excuse to further delay elections and stall the political process. What we are seeing in Jammu and Kashmir, both in the valley or in the Jammu region, is a security manifestation of a political crisis, where the security forces are paying the price for political inaction or horrible or evil politics that we have seen being conducted by the BJP. For the rest of India, it really doesn't matter for people who support Mr. Modi. They don't care for what's happening in eastern Ladakh with China. They don't seem to care for what's happening in Manipur. They don't seem to care for what's happening in Ladakh to the Buddhist people who are protesting. Because they support Mr. Modi for whatever reason. There may be ideological reasons, Hindutva reasons, for whatever reasons. They're not going to. It is not going to matter to them. But to the people, particularly within the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and for people who really care for India, as Siddharth said, retired officials and other Indians who really care for it, it matters. Because BJP said, once they said after demonetization that terrorism has been finished in Jammu and Kashmir. Then they again claimed it after Article 370 that terrorism has been finished in Jammu and Kashmir. Mr. Amit Shah goes on to claim that he is the, after Sardar Patel, he's the only guy who is strong enough to deal with militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. But the fact of the matter is that there was no militancy in Kathua. There was no militancy in Doda and Rajouri. Militancy had come down. But that militancy has gone up now. People are dying in Kathua. The last incident which has taken place is virtually on Himachal border. And if you look at that incident, I was looking at a PTI report. The army says that they fired 5,500 rounds for 3 guys who want to ambush you and running away. 5,500 rounds. It's unimaginable, the kind of the way things are going. There are two more aspects. The one part is there used to be forces, the armed forces or the army's units or Rashtriya Rifles in this region which have been moved out because of the China border crisis. Forces were moved there. So there have been some gaps which have been created. On top of that, you have massive shortfall within the army. I was asking someone the other day and somebody told me for we were 13.5 lakh strong army, the vacancies are more than 2 lakhs now. So you are stretching the army on the China border. You have pushed people out from there. So there are consequences of the fact that you are not willing to deal with other crises which are on your border, whether with China or elsewhere, and those are getting manifested. Showing themselves up in places like Jammu and Kashmir. And I think to your original question, BJP will have to pay a massive price, at least within the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, if not in the rest of India, for its inability to.
One more data point, Sravasti, moving away from the violence part. Today or early in the morning, the Jammu Kashmir police arrested Nazir Ahmed Ronga, former head of the Jammu Kashmir High Court Bar Association. I can understand if you have a proper case against him. Nobody is immune, right? You can be a lawyer, you can be a journalist. If there's a proper case, there's evidence, the police has the right to move against you and then you fight it out in court. They arrest him at 1:30 in the morning under the Public Security Act, Public Safety Act, PSA, draconian act which is widely recognized as being abused by the government. You arrest people because you have no probable cause, but simply because you consider them a troublemaker. So this is a law that allows you to hold them without trial, without evidence for up to 6 months or a year. Why are you doing this? And if you're going to do this to lawyers because you disagree with something they've said or done, right? So then there is no freedom of speech in J&K. There's no freedom of association. So you did what you did in August 2019 because you claim you are achieving the full integration of Kashmir with the Constitution of India and the rest of India. But you don't have laws like PSA operating in Delhi. You don't have laws like that operating in other parts of India. You may have sort of slightly watered down equivalents like the NSA, which in Delhi they don't invoke, but in UP they do. But you don't have arrests on that scale, right? So what is the Modi government up to? This is a centrally administered territory. And blame must be laid at the door of the Union Home Minister. The buck stops with him. And you're picking up a former president of the Bar Association. You have no charges. You hold him under PSA. This is the extent of the problem there.
The politics of oppression and humiliation of the Kashmiri people or of people of religious minorities in border areas to satisfy the core base of the BJP within the rest of the country is going to have consequences, and 10 years down the line we are already witnessing those consequences. You cannot continue to oppress and humiliate religious minorities because you want to cater to a certain core supporter of yours. Those consequences are now clearly visible to us.
I think a sense of alienation that the people in Jammu and Kashmir are feeling are also exacerbated by incidents like this. And speaking of that, shifting our focus to another region in India where such alienation is taking place is in Manipur, where this week leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi did visit Manipur. This was his first visit after the Lok Sabha elections, and this was his third visit since the violence first started in May 2023. But since then, about 14 months have passed and Prime Minister Modi has not visited the violence-torn state, though he was forced in a sense to make a statement on Manipur for the first time in Parliament on his own. The last time he spoke was during the no confidence motion last year. So how do you see this visit by Rahul Gandhi? Of course, it's welcome in the sense that it is keeping Manipur in the news and in the national headlines. But is it enough to keep focus on Manipur? He's in the end, he's just the leader of the opposition.
The opposition can play only such a role, right? A limited role. Of course, the Congress party won both the parliamentary seats there. So there is a sense in which the party has a responsibility, and I think it was fitting for its leader and for the LOP to, not his leader, but Rahul Gandhi, but his LOP, for him to make that visit. I think the way in which Manipur was raised during the debate on the president's speech by the opposition was something that people in Manipur would have noticed. It's a different matter. You can have different views on disruption of parliamentary proceedings or the Prime Minister speaking and so on, but they were drawing attention to the fact that here is a part of India where more than 200 people have died, whereas Bimal Koijam, who's one of the members of parliament elected this time, said more than 60,000 people remain displaced, people of all communities. And you today have, of course, day-to-day incidents of violence may not be as high as they were at the peak, but arms are still being sort of freely, I mean, you have arms movements, arms are not being recovered, you have killings, you have no-go areas for people, you have, it's a virtual partitioning of the state, you have a sort of a latent civil war-like situation that needs urgent, a healing touch from the only authority that can do it, which is the Union of India. And of course the Manipur government, both of which are in the hands of the BJP. And the reason you don't have peace is because of the ineptitude and inefficiency, and I would say also the biased politics of the BJP government in the state. This is an open secret. So for Rahul Gandhi to draw attention, I think it was important. He reminds us by making, did you say 3 visits?
Yeah.
That Modi has yet to make even one. And Sushant, there was a cartoon, I think Deccan Herald or Times of India, which showed Modi and Amit Shah standing, looking at a montage of Satish Acharya, looking at Rahul in Manipur, Rahul in Assam, Rahul with Agnivir, and Modi is lamenting to Amit Shah that but I'm the PM, and Amit Shah says, well, at least you welcomed the cricket team, right? So that sometimes satire says it best, right? Modi is a photo op event management PM who couldn't be bothered when tragedies of this kind happen, which in the public perception would be linked to his performance, right? So he can express condolences when you have a stampede. He can express condolences when people die due to acts of God, but when people die as a result of misgovernance or deliberate official policy, his lips are sealed. And I think that just for reminding the nation about that, this visit by Rahul was worth it.
I think in a sense, Sushant, we can credit the opposition for keeping Manipur in the headlines after the elections, not just in parliament, but with Rahul Gandhi's visit as well. But we saw that even on the day of Rahul Gandhi's visit, there was an attack in Jiribam district where he did visit as well. So the violence has not gone anywhere, and Modi's mere statement in parliament is not going to wish it away. And is it enough to just make a statement in parliament without really visiting the place, without just saying that my government is making continued efforts, but the efforts are not showing really? So is it enough to make just a mere statement?
Definitely it is not enough. The fact of the matter is, as Siddharth mentioned, more than 6,500 weapons from state armories are still with the people. A militia is publicly operating, where the Manipur chief minister says that these are misguided youth who will give away the weapons when the situation normalizes. Which other state would allow this? As far as I know, publicly what has been reported, twice he has been asked to resign and he has refused to resign. The second time they wanted to remove him by asking him to contest the Lok Sabha poll, and he flatly refused to do so. It shows not just administrative weakness but also political weakness of Mr. Modi and Amit Shah as political leaders. The simple fact of the matter is that there have been many states starting from the 1970s and 80s where these kinds of problems have happened, security crises have happened. These state governments have been sacked once they failed to deliver, whether it was Jammu and Kashmir, whether it was Punjab, whether it was Mizoram, whether it was Assam, and their states have been brought under central rule. And more often than not, these states were ruled by the same party which was ruling at the center at that point in time, which was the Congress party. This is not a very unusual thing. You put a more professional governor, somebody, or maybe a former civil servant, maybe a former cop, maybe a former intelligence official. You provide some substantive advisors. You start political engagement with all sides. You try and quickly build bridges. You try and bring the security situation under control. There is no rocket science in this. India has done this for donkeys of years. India has had major crises where we've done this. But the idea here is not to build trust. The idea is essentially to exploit a majoritarian narrative where you think by feeding these majoritarian feelings against the minorities and building up this sons of the soil argument, you are going to create a permanent majority in the state and never lose the elections. Unfortunately, that has been proven untrue. The BJP lost the Manipur inner seat, Lok Sabha seat, which is essentially a Meitei seat. If you are going to do all this to win the Meitei vote or Meitei support and you lose that seat, clearly even your electoral strategy has failed. So they have failed administratively, they have failed politically, and they have failed electorally. The security failure is already visible to us. So it's an all-round failure in all domains, and nothing has been done, irrespective of Mr. Modi's claims that he makes in parliament or whatever he says, which can actually redeem the situation or make the situation better.
So political solution in Manipur is something that's urgently needed, and we have been discussing that on the Wire app for the past few weeks, in fact over the course of the last year, and we will be continuing to stress on that. But I also want to shift focus now to the law and order situation in Tamil Nadu, which has also come under the scanner in the last week after the BSP president K. Armstrong was killed in a brutal manner in Chennai on July 5th. Now the Tamil Nadu government has made several moves like reshuffling, major reshufflements in the police, and 8 people have been arrested. But the demands for a CBI probe has grown, not just from the family but also from the BSP and other opposition parties. Siddharth, perhaps the big takeaway, apart from the questions of law and order, which we will get into in just a moment, is that the legal battle that we saw to bury his body, that has kind of brought back into focus the Tamil Nadu government's response to atrocities and discrimination faced by Dalits. Why was the government refusing to allow his body being buried at the BSP office? What kind of law and order situation would have come across, and the message that has gone out to the people?
I think that this incident, right, the killing of Mr. Armstrong, and then the fracas over the burial, and then the question of who will investigate, they make little sense within the context of the BSP's own role in Tamil Nadu. We know that the BSP may be many things in a state like Uttar Pradesh, and even there its strength is being questioned. It may have made inroads historically in places like Rajasthan, Punjab, at one point in Delhi, Madhya Pradesh. In Tamil Nadu, it's not much of a factor. And you have other Dalit parties that are more prominent, some of whom have allied with the Stalin government and are part of the sort of India front, which swept the state. So I think the killing itself, I don't want to speculate as to who's responsible, but I'd be very surprised if this were to emerge as an assassination that had the imprints of some of the big parties there. Frankly, it doesn't make sense from the point of view of the role that the BSP sort of plays. It's not a threat to the DMK. The question of burial, the BSP has pointed to DMDK, the fact that a burial was allowed of Vijaykanth in the office, party office. The Tamil Nadu government is pointing to a court order. Frankly, it's very hard to get to the bottom of this, but I think that, Tamil Nadu has always, sadly, been party to the politics over memorials. I remember when I was working in Tamil Nadu, the whole question of locating, where some of these memorials would be on Marina Beach or not. A lot of areas been encroached. So this is always a subject of controversy. Beyond that, it's very hard to say, but I think that somewhere down the line, the fact that the DMK has put its foot down, maybe it believes that in the long run, BSP may emerge as more of a player. But you have, the party itself has been adept at bringing some of the Dalit parties under, within its tent. And these are more prominent than the BSP. So I'm not sure, again, how far that politics goes. On the CBI issue, question of investigation. Again, as I say, if there were credible indications of collusion by ruling parties in the killings, or if one could think of a scenario politically where that might have happened, then yeah, it is plausible to want the CBI to investigate. Given the way the CBI functions, given the way the Modi government has used agencies to target state governments opposed to it, my sense is that were this to snowball into a bigger issue and the CBI were to come in, this would simply be a stick to beat the DMK government with, without necessarily giving any justice to Mr. Armstrong and his family and the BSP as a whole. And I also want to underline here, though, a wider takeaway, which is that whether in Tamil Nadu or in West Bengal, the opposition cannot run away from the fact that violence has become a part of politics. Right? We are seeing all these videos of Trinamool Congress people beating up so-called people accused of crime and so on. This kind of taking the law into your own hands, this kind, by ruling parties, or giving, allowing political violence of the kind that we've seen in Tamil Nadu to happen, this kind of permissibility is going to rebound very badly on the opposition. I think it's essential that whether we're talking of DMK or TMC or the Congress and states that it rules, you have to show by example that you offer the people of India something radically different from the politics of violence, from the politics of intolerance and hate that the BJP has made its trademark, right? And I think it's important to emphasize to these leaders that, look, you have a responsibility here. And simply to say, I'm not involved, or simply to say, well, I'm punishing an official, that's not going to be enough. I think direction has to come from the top. People like Stalin, people like Mamata have to make it very clear to party cadre and to the administration as a whole that there will be zero tolerance for any manifestation of political violence.
And that's really the question that's coming up,
I
right?
think I would differentiate slightly with Siddharth on DMK and TMC are two different cases. TMC, the party cadre itself is deeply involved, MLAs, ministers, etc. And there's a different context there. On Tamil Nadu, one is the issues, or as you rightly said, and as Siddharth also mentioned, it's very clear that there is a Dalit issue. Atrocities over Dalits have been always very high in Tamil Nadu, and there is a manifestation of that. Beyond that, I think and I look at as an indicator always as ANI, the way it covers news. When ANI starts tweeting, 2,000 tweets and putting out every single bit, you clearly know that somebody in the ruling party at the center or in the government wants this issue to be highlighted to embarrass the DMK and the opposition government and show that, oh, there is no law and order. When has Mayawati gone to any other place where Dalits have died? Mayawati doesn't go out. Mayawati went out and went to that place. And that's why people start believing that Mayawati is only acting at the behest of the BJP. Her vote share in UP is down to 9%. So there are massive problems with DMK government. There are issues of law and order. There are issues of corruption. There are all kinds of issues, social atrocities, temple entry, walls being made on the roads. All kinds of issues are there. But the way any issue is highlighted and built up, and and the way it is carried on by sections of national media, it becomes amply clear that there is a political motive, even beyond the law and order issue, which is at play here.
Yet the DMK government is still facing some questions on law and order, despite the fact that they have arrested 8 people, and Chief Minister Stalin himself has gone and met the family members of Mr. Armstrong and assured speedy justice. But these are some questions that are not going to go away for the DMK for quite some time now. And before we wrap up, let's just quickly bring in one last topic of discussion, which is the Ambani wedding, which is taking place this week. And questions are being raised about the opulence that this wedding is seeing in India, where thousands of crores are being spent. Of course, it is his personal wealth, but still we are at the end of the day a poor country, and the optics of such opulence is being questioned. Your last comments on this, Siddharth?
No, I mean, all the data has testified to shocking increases in inequality in this country, right? So the fact that Adani's net worth has risen and people have been impoverished, this is well known. So I think bring them on. Let's have more of these kinds of demonstrations so that the data denials and the government's claim that no, everything is fine, that can be disproved by this sort of sign of opulence on our television screen. So I think more the merrier.
But I think the lack of moral outrage does bother me. The fact that in the same country, maybe 15, 20 years back, there would have been massive moral outrage, public outrage, about how this kind of opulence can be done in a very poor country like this. This is something which is completely unacceptable, which is going on. But the fact of the matter is that more than half of India's big media is owned by Mr. Ambani. So it's unlikely that India's big media is going to say that this is horrible. India's cricket team is owned by him, as you were mentioning earlier. India's film stars are all lined up there. You have virtually who's who of India there. So who's going to go and outrage and say this is completely incorrect and this should not be done? Mr. Modi is not going to outrage, and nobody wants to actually go out and say that this is unacceptable and this should not be happening in a country like India. We should be actually feeling horrified that the guy who's going to be bridegroom, whatever his name is, Akash Ambani or whatever, Anant Ambani, the guy is wearing a crocodile jacket worth 40,000 euros or something, which is absolutely ridiculous. Crocodile leather or alligator leather jacket. It is absolutely ridiculous. We are really a poor country. This is a $2,200 per capita country, $2,400 per capita country with 90% of the people below that level. 90%.
All right, so as you enjoy the images of the Ambani wedding this week, perhaps you would also like to remember and somewhere in the corner of your mind that inequality in India is very high at this moment, and the World Inequality Lab had reported that inequality levels are of the levels of the British Raj. So that is something to remember as we enjoy all these images in the coming days to come. And thank you so much for joining us on the Wire Wrap, and I'll see you next week.